please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. Going to call this meeting to order at 6 p.m. Can I get a roll call, please?
Michael Cashman.
Present.
Thomas Wood.
Also present.
Barbara Hebert.
Here.
Charles Costick.
Here.
Dana Isabella.
Here.
James Coffey.
Here.
And Katie Pucci is present.
Is there anyone seeking to provide public comment this evening? Seeing none, we'll move forward. Throw it right over to you, Scott.
All righty, thank you. Let's see, you may think of me as a water person, but I'm here to discuss electrification for fleet management of Plattsburgh. Yeah, that is exciting stuff. Electrifying. So, interesting enough, it was June 3rd, 2022 that we signed our agreement with Clear Results and NISITE to pursue this program. So just close to a year ago. And it started really, once we made it into our cohort, October was the first session. We had 6 of them with a final presentation at the end, which is what I'm going to give to you today. But basically we met monthly for an hour and a half. Our cohort was all buses except for school districts, except for myself. So it was a little different view sometimes because I was the only non-bus, and bus has different drivers right now by the state that get committed into electrification. So sometimes I felt odd man out, but needless to say, we worked through it and got all our stuff done. We had to create a charter, and I guess I'll maybe point out this thing. So one of the first things we had to do was provide a lot of information to them. So we populated all our vehicles, kind of what they do, how often they do it, to then help us allocate or assign an appropriate electric vehicle to do the same thing. So this is a presentation that we did in March. We all did them in the group, so we met for several days, for several hours. So today, how we're organized, goals, kind of vehicles that came out of that spreadsheet database analysis. And then we had an individual come on site and look at our charging infrastructure. They also met with NISITE, so we have some of the results of that. Total cost of ownership and emissions impacts, which was pretty much modeled based on the individual vehicle that you chose. Then some budget items, along with maybe some opportunities for funds or grant opportunities, and then next steps to kind of keep us moving along. So, kind of blurb about town. You know, we're located on the northeastern part of New York State, nestled between the Great Lakes and the Atlantic Mountains. We've got roughly 12,000 individuals, 45 square miles, 100 miles of road, 72 employees. We operate roughly a fleet of 50 vehicles, 11 plows, and numerous pieces of heavy equipment used to maintain roads, utilities, and parks throughout the town. So this was kind of the charter effort that we got into first. So really Chuck was heavily involved as a board sponsor, so Chuck was involved in kind of, when he could step in and was involved in the process. I was the main champion. And then really due to some of the building needs and electrification, electrical assessment stuff, Steve was probably the next involved from our group. But in the end, you know, kind of involved the planning department, buildings and grounds, and the mechanics, and a lot of the data acquisition had to come through the mechanics. So, and then really we came up with these set of goals, which, you know, they're all adjustable. And, you know, really we kind of said that we would try to electrify at least 50% of our light duty vehicles by 2025. We really had a concern and a need to understand the charging requirements and the electrical needs, so we highlighted that. That was probably our primary goal that Chuck and I had shared a lot of, and the team. And then really to try to secure a vehicle within the next year or two, really to assess. Especially, we were looking to get a Lightning to just see how it fit into the fleet, see how it did in different scenarios, cold weather, idling, being on jobs, things of that nature. And then really for us to assess our medium and heavy duty vehicles as being suitable for any type of transition to electric vehicles. So really this kind of lays out that we have 10 pickup trucks that are F-150s, Silverado type, the ICE internal combustion engines, switch that over to electric vehicle. Really, the equivalent that's on the market right now is probably a 150 Lightning. So then this kind of just went through what that purchasing may be, suggested over time to, based a little bit on the age and transition of some of the internal combustion engines. Similar where the cargo van would be done with a Ford E-Transit. And then to just give you some idea how those got picked and how they fit in is that they kind of looked at their range that they could satisfy. You can kind of see the E-Transit it kind of drops down. It's not a huge range associated with that. But some of these were thought that around town and the circumstances in which they're under, that some of these could probably satisfy some of those requirements, and then depending on some of our charging.
You said half of it fleet by 2025,
Yeah.
but according to the purchase things, it was only 3.
Well, that's spread out over several vehicles though. It's not all just, that was just the 150s, and so I got another slide here, Tom. So then we got, more vehicles in here with the Cherokee, and then they had identified the Volkswagen as a possible replacement for that. And then its range, 275, kind of gives you the capacity of the battery. And this vehicle would be kind of slated for normal business hours. Then out of the charging assessment that was done on site, it was really looked at doing it in 2 phases. Really to do an external effort off of the generator with a few chargers in initially, and then to go with a few more chargers, some fast chargers on the next phase, and then ideally bring some of them maybe into the building, which you can kind of see. On here, really it's the triangles that show up where the locations would be established. You can kind of see them show up in here a little bit. So anyhow, it's 2 level 2 chargers, some DC fast chargers, and then some dual ports, which they deem are the make-ready units. And then the next phase would have been 7 additional dual port units. Talks about charge time. One of the things about some of the grant opportunities are driven by who the charging stations are available to. So being able to have them available to the public gets you more funding. So we tried to look at, those options as we decided to put things here on site. And obviously the ones inside the building would not be available to the public. It could be constrained on some of the budgeting options, is looking at that. So, but essentially it'd be off the generator building, and then there'd have to be new power brought into this side. As part of the assessment, this is where the conversation starts to take a turn, is to find available capacity on the grid and what is available and what's out there, and kind of what can NYSEG provide. And the short answer is we're highly constrained in that there isn't a whole lot of availability even on the grid for us to tie into or upgrade. Right now, we have a 280 line coming in. We would have to upgrade to 480, 3-phase. That is really not available on Banker Road, and it's thought that it might be able to come a little bit further away, but pretty much the area we know is pretty taxed from an electrical infrastructure standpoint. So, with that said, really even the stuff we have in-house now can't support a whole lot of electrification, if any. We have a hybrid right now that kind of struggles to get charged and do things, but without some of the dedicated charging stations and power upgrades, a lot of this program can't move forward. So I think some of the goal setting will have to be driven by really the infrastructure upgrades on the electrical side to be able to truly pull this off. Or we gotta go park them around town, I guess, down in Target. And then we'll have to take our internal combustion engines down to.
Who decides if the electrical infrastructure is going to come up this way or be sufficient?
I think it's part of their overall goals of both the state and NYSEG to try to roll out and expand electrical infrastructure. I think, you'll notice that, New York Power Authority's in the area making lots of upgrades, and their hopes are that someday that the 2 meet down the road and maybe there might be enough power and enough infrastructure capacity and need and availability of trucks and vehicles and all that stuff. that's
Tom,
someday in the
I
future.
would jump in to say two things about this project. One is thank you to Scott and Chuck for going down this path. One of it is, you know, the planning process is to better understand it, right? A lot of this is very much driven by the state's initiatives for certain goals and objectives. So this process, even like, they had to put in certain aggressive goals to kind of allow for the numbers to go in there, knowing realistically that that was not going to be what the town was going to be able to achieve. I would go so far as to confidently say that the North Country has been having a conversation about corner to corner, lot to lot, however you want to talk about it, broadband forever and a day. And I think there has to be a realism, you know, a realistic understanding that the infrastructure for the trunks of electricity, et cetera, are gonna take a significant amount of time. So even though that the state has very aggressive, you know, goals for electrification, I would dare say that I don't think any of those are going to be met date, you know, the direct day. But by understanding what our needs are as things, you know, develop, we can better calibrate or recalibrate them in an appropriate fashion.
Yeah, no, and I think it helps in developing the budget and all that good stuff.
Does this get reported, like, to NICEAG or to the state so that they see? Is that part of
I
the
mean,
payment
this
process?
program was sponsored by NICEAG, so Clear Results was working directly for NICEAG, so Clear Results and NICEAG had a direct path of communication, and NICEAG was involved in this effort to look at the capacity and what was there. And the thing is that, you know, some areas they seem to be able to weigh in on what they thought was gonna happen, and may happen in other areas they had, you know,
Okay.
they didn't have a whole lot of idea what it was.
That's why it's important to plan things out.
Well, that's what I would guess, they need this information for them to
Ahead of
actually.
time.
Yeah, and, you know, that was some of the discussion even with the charging, and, you know, if you ask for the whole thing at first, does that help you get prioritized, or if you ask for less, and so there's this whole kind of like, how do you fit in and get in the queue, and, you know, you have the same conversation about buying vehicles, you know, whole thing, and procuring anything nowadays is that same conversation. So,
Thank you.
It'll be interesting to see how the solar farm, when it's constructed on Banker Road, impacts that. And there may be an irony in that having the solar farm constructed actually took capacity out of the three-phase line, because that is the three-phase that they're pulling into.
And don't forget, I mean, we are in the heart of the industrial park too, or, you know, a segment of the industrial park. So, there's a significant need for, you know, electricity.
yeah, no, I think anything else uses quite a bit, you know,
So
we're running blowers.
there's a
and
lot of competing and complex factors to this.
No bus uses a lot, so.
Mhm.
But to give you some idea of that layout of charging infrastructure, their cost estimate is, you know, roughly $350,000. They thought that, you know, like I said, depending on accessibility, and some of those things, they thought that we could maybe recoup, you know, $118,000 of that, so bringing our cost down to $230,000. So where those lie in the future as we move forward, you know, it'll be interesting to see. And then, like I said, some of these incentives that they're dangling out in front of municipalities are really, they're tax breaks, but they're trying to figure out how to turn around and give a tax break to a tax exempt entity. So that process has still gotta be worked out for some of those incentives and funding to become available, so. But then, you know, out of this, we kind of pick the vehicles we like and what we're doing with them, and then they're kind of do a comparison of total cost of ownership, and then the emissions impact. So you got internal combustion here on the left with electric vehicle on the right. You can see the cost of the electric vehicle is higher, but the top portion of this is the like the electric infrastructure portion. So that's a one-time cost. They'll be spread across these initial vehicles, and then that cost will go away. So then you can see that total cost of ownership does start to come down over the vehicle as, you know, the cost of the infrastructure starts to go away or get paid for. You know, one of the other conversations we had a lot is that, you know, some of these, you know, cost of the initial vehicle is a little bit challenging to compare apple to apple sometimes, because we are, depending on where the Office of, you know, Goods and Services are with being able to purchase vehicles and the pricing at the time, and, you know, historically, we used to do pretty decent on internal combustion engine pricing for, say, a F-150. So then we could turn around and a lot of times at auction, we would recoup, you know, a lot of those costs and we could kind of keep that all going into fleet management. Electric vehicles, we don't know where some of those incentives may lie with the New York State to incentivize them or the cost of them. Right now, there's not even availability of them, so the conversation is even tougher. So that cost initially is higher, so there may be, you may have to look to hold on to these vehicles longer to be able to get that cost effectiveness also, which is a little bit shifting from where we were going with some of our internal combustion stuff.
Scott, was there any comparison, of savings with, you know, kilowatt hour price versus fuel?
Yeah, and that's what is down here is the kilowatt hour and the pricing, but even some of that, our fuel we get subsidized, so we tried to use as close to what we were getting from our electric bills and our fuel bills that we get through our contract, so that it was a little bit of really comparing what our cost would be instead of some artificial.
Right, cost.
Yes, yeah, what is our real cost, not some like, you know, put in a model and it assumes that, you know, that national average of gas is, you know.
Well, you see a huge reduction in the maintenance cost, maintenance and repairs.
Huge reduction. You don't have all those moving parts.
Yeah.
You know, and it's too bad that economics drives all these conversations, especially as it comes to climate change and emissions. But you can see that, you know, it's not even, you can't even start to compare the two. So here's an internal combustion emissions, then here's your electric one. So, you know, to say that there's, you know, it'd be nice if we can make our decisions based on emissions, and carbon footprint, but, we know that at the end of the day, a lot of it is driven by economics of the affordability stuff, so. And then this was for the, I think this was for the van, so similar type opportunity. These were some of those tax, incentives and grant opportunities. The first one is this tax credit where businesses and tax exempt organizations, they expect to be able to have this benefit. That is yet to be worked out. The state has a couple of zero emission infrastructure grants. These were some that were heavily driven by public accessibility. I'm not sure how they would view some of our infrastructure and availability of it. And then Make Ready, this is through NICEAG, which a lot of this piggybacks with the state program that kind of made the work together. So those were some of the opportunities they thought that we had at the current moment, and a lot of stuff is evolving and changing every day, really. Here's just some, what they thought was some of the costs. You know, the interesting thing was sitting with all the bus, all the school districts, you know, their cost of initial vehicle purchase investment, the numbers are very staggering. Because, you know, when a bus costs $1 million now, and they need 10 or 11 of them in their fleet, and the numbers are quoted, you know, and most of them need electrical infrastructure upgrades. So, you know, see where we may fit in the priority of the state's overall transition. You know, the state has other priorities ahead of some of, you know, probably just general municipal infrastructure. So, but we went over the charging stuff, the vehicle purchases, you know, total charges, and then we, you know, taking out some of the cost savings. And then, you know, really it shows up that there is a cost savings, you know, with the operation and the lifetime of operating cost. And then we basically talked about, you know, now next steps are to share the information and kind of get out there and beat the drum and then try to look for grant applications. And, you know, really I think it's one of those things that every time we look at a vehicle or replacement, is there an opportunity? You know, granted, we need a lot of our infrastructure upgraded here too before we can really, I feel like, truly commit to, you know, transition our fleet, so.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Chuck.
I'll let,
Thanks, Scott, he drove it.
A lot of heavy lifting.
I'll let Trevor jump in there to, or Jess, or, we have another presentation. I just, in summary, I just want to touch upon, again, you know, our general standpoint for the electrification is, you know, we are faced with the realities of, you it's a much more global conversation as it relates to, infrastructure. So, the town has led in some other ways, will continue to try to lead in some other ways, but, this was not purely done for electrification, it was for us to be able to learn a lot, and I think there's a lot of
Yeah, it
information.
just kind of creates a roadmap and know where we're at.
Exactly, so
So we didn't know much of that getting into it.
Yeah,
And one of the interesting things is that it really drove us to compile some of our data and our information, which you would think that we just click, but we don't click, so.
Nice work on the info.
Yep.
good stuff, good
Yeah.
stuff.
Spreadsheet, thank you, Scott.
All right.
Trevor's got you next.
Yep.
See you, Scott.
Have a good night.
Yeah.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you, Scott.
Yes.
Have a good night, Scott.
You too.
Let's see if I'm spelling it right.
You got it.
Okay.
Sometimes there's too many S's. Yeah.
Triple S,
Got it.
yes.
Thank you. Better than double F Jeff.
You're feeling lispy. Yeah. I do the same thing. Glad to see you, Glenn. I thought it was just me.
I have terrible
One
eyesight,
thing,
so. I think it's,
You know, when you saw the maintenance cost, but unfortunately, replacing some of these batteries are also really expensive, so it's like a direction. Yeah, just something to mindful.
It's
I think
deep
that's all
dive, sorry.
included in maintenance and repair.
The cost to replace the batteries that you needed?
Yeah.
Projector would be my guess.
Yeah, hopefully, because again, that's the other.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right,
damn right. You really want me to do this whole thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
I talked 2.5 hours yesterday.
That's true.
You know,
Yeah, I know. You listen to me here. So, you guys all received a report from Trevor a couple months ago based on the moratorium that was passed in November. Local note law number 2 of 2022, imposing a 12-month moratorium on applications for self-storage. There was a significant number of applications received by our planning board for that use. So we thought it might be prudent to pump the brakes and take a look at where more storage could go or not go, and look at the zones, since we're already doing a zoning amendment anyway. With the primary concern being public utility infrastructure, since those types of facilities generally don't use public water and sewer unless there's an office space. So there's about 1,258 storage units with exterior access right now, about 100 plus or minus indoor units. 459 additional units were approved in the last year and a half or so, which is a lot. But we know that there's pretty high demand in our area because of social services using those units to store people's items, whether long-term or short-term, when they're being relocated. And we know that we have like a 99% occupation rate also on our storage because of that high demand, because it's obviously your average everyday people plus the government using those units. So that's why there's such a high demand for them. They're also a really low risk, low cost investment for people for the most part. They don't take a lot of money to put them up, so they're fairly lucrative, which is why they're attractive. Right now, there's about 10 properties where it exists. This is the districts where it's currently allowed. This is the map, prior to the change that we may be making next week to the map. You'll see A1 is the airport itself, A2 is the old base, SD is the new smart growth industrial area, town center. Commercial and service center is kind of our old traditional zoning that's on Route 9 north and south. And these X's represent the existing self-storage in town. You're probably familiar with most of them. A couple of them are to be built or in the current process of being built. Shake Storage just finished up on Route 9 North, and there's another one that's gonna go across from the movie theater up there, as well as the converted property on Sharon Ave that has the pods. If you've driven by there, you've seen all the little bunker looking things. So, considerations from the moratorium, the availability of utilities, the character of the neighborhood, compatibility of neighboring uses, the gateways to the town and city. We've had some calls about the fact that there's storage, on the entryways to town, and is that, how we want the entries to town to look. What's the community need? We obviously know there's a need, or at least a demand for them. What does the comprehensive plan say about this use? It's kind of silent on it, but it isn't silent on other uses that may be more important to the town than that use. The purposes of each district, and then overall value to the town. So there's a couple options. One, you can let the moratorium just end and business as usual, no other changes. We can amend the districts where self-storage is an allowed use. The zoning amendment that's in front of you right now does include some amendments, which will be on the next slide. We also are considering, in addition, or maybe just as its own thing, to identify a geographic prohibition zone where there are certain uses that we just prohibit within town center, where our highest index use land values are already. Or you can just remove it from the the ordinance altogether and just have it only ever allowed by variance, which is probably not super ideal because it's in such high demand that the ZBA will probably be overburdened with those types of applications. So this is our proposal. Continue to allow them in the commercial and service center districts, which is primarily, like I said, Route 9 North and South, because it's already there. You know, it's kind of created the character of the neighborhood by already existing there. So even if we discontinued it, the ones that are already there will stay there. They're probably not going anywhere anytime soon. I believe it's already allowed in A1, but we are considering allowing it in A2 as well, which is mostly the old base, what's not on the actual airport itself, because it's compatible with the city zoning as well. You've probably seen that the city's had a couple of different storage developments go up over there. There's one very noticeable one at the end of Arizona where they cleared all that wooded spot. So compatibility with city zoning, you know, because the compact, we're making an effort to be compatible with the city and work collaboratively with the city to make sure that our border areas are compatible. It's also fairly compatible with the existing conditions of that area because, as we know, the old base has some soil concerns and some contamination concerns where some larger developments aren't feasible because of the depth the unit might have to dig in order to put in certain developments out there, whereas storage units, because people aren't living there and because they don't dig very deep and the foundations are slabs, it's less of a concern with the contamination that exists. So then the third part of this would be to remove it from the special district, the industrial park, industrial, and prohibit it in town center. Because we're also considering prohibiting tier 3 solar in town center, where there's public water, public sewer, high value properties. It would protect those properties and utilities in town center. It would also protect the semi-limited available industrial property that we have in town. You know, obviously we have a amendment in front of you right now to zone more industrial in town because certain developers are not able to find property that works for them for industrial. So if we want people to use industrial zoning for industrial purposes, it makes sense to take storage out of that because it's not really an industrial use. And this is the rough geographic area that we would be prohibiting certain uses out of.
That pink outer line, if you're wondering.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to see, but it's this, bright pink. Kind of trying to stick to the easy boundaries of town, so this town city line, 374, Walls Hill Extension, the Turnpike and Ruger. So you'll notice that some of our town center zoning is outside of that, but in an effort to not be overly restrictive, trying to really outline the core and protect some of this land up here on the road that's really valuable for residential.
Are they being built where people are living? Basically, are they built where there's people living that need to store things?
They're kind of anywhere. I talked to one or two that said that they pretty much can fill them no matter where they put them. So like Chris LaFave's over here, Why Not Storage on Walls Hill, he was full, has a waiting list, and that's kind of not near anybody. I mean, yes, Walls Hill has quite a bit of residential, but it's not dense residential necessarily. And then the Route 9 North one's really the only residential near there is the temporary kind of housing that DSS uses in the motels. So it doesn't seem to go hand in hand next to residential.
Yeah, they're not tied to necessarily residential areas, so they're like quote unquote, you know, like going out to like an, detached garage or something like that. People
They're
aren't using
a
it in that
destination.
form.
Easy access.
Standalone self-service
Right.
storage creates a unique tension in that in our smart growth plan, we've kind of identified that we want to preserve and create density and use the water and sewer to its highest extent, improve walkability, all these things, reduce sprawl, have housing in that area. And at the same time, like you just said, sometimes people would want their storage near housing, but the catch-22 there is, the housing's likely to be where there's public water, public sewer. And of course, the storage takes up a lot of land, doesn't use water and sewer, and has a pretty low property value. Even though it can make a lot of money for the owner, it doesn't necessarily assess very high. You'll see on that list, that table I provided, the comparable acreages for a commercial use compared to, the same acreage of a self-service storage is, half or less.
So it doesn't provide any extra revenue,
What's that?
extra revenue.
Well, it does. I
They're
mean,
making quite a bit of money.
they assess, I mean, they're still valuable commercial properties, but when you compare a restaurant compared to
Or even
a
just
self-service
housing.
storage, or even housing, or, I think one of my comparisons in here, was comparing easy self-storage, which is up here on Route 3, it's, 3.5 acres, it's valued at 634,000, just across the road, the same acreage, 3.8, it's assessed at $1 million. Just so you get that conundrum.
One of the other things that I toss out there, that I've heard through the grapevine, I can't say for certain, but, I believe the college used to have space for, some materials to be left behind semester to semester, for students returning. It sounds like they're not offering that service anymore. I know when I was an undergraduate, Olivia and I used to rent a storage unit. It was easier, and, college and university towns tend to have a lot of these, but self-storage is one of the fastest growing businesses in the country. People just have more stuff than ever before. And, and a lot of times people are using these now, for transitional, people are downsizing, before they can sell their apartment or, various things. So, I just wanna thank Trevor and Jess for really methodically looking at this, and then, we need to make some determinations sooner rather than later.
One thing I don't see here, that I see, like when I lived in Florida, no, almost all the self-storage down in Florida are also home bases for like landscapers, whatever. They run their businesses right out of storage. I don't see that as much here. But
Yeah,
It's-
it's more people's
Personal.
stuff.
it's stuff.
The,
And
something
people
else.
don't return to them either. We've heard from storage unit owners that they set it and forget it, basically, and that's
Yeah.
why there's no availability, because they set it, they forget it. It's so cheap to store, if it's $60 a month, a lot of people can afford that and just never go back and get it.
Yeah, very few people, I think, one of the owners said very few people have them for less than 3 years, so. Jess said something that was really kinda, you may have thought, it may have caught your ear strange that we were recommending perhaps putting it in A2 and adding a place where it's allowed. But the same proposal is maybe taking it out of some places. If our greatest concern that we've talked about, whether it be large-scale solar or these type of uses, is we've kind of come to this point of realizing what we need, the area of town that we need to be kind of protective of. Whatever town center ends up being defined. And, I think that's it, and you realize that Route 9 North is no longer the perceived area of growth, where development is really occurring necessarily. It's certainly happening in town center. And you need to allow uses somewhere, right? The idea of just never allowing them anywhere, you can zone things out until they're in the hinterlands, and part of the thing we thought about was, well, if we're worried about public water and public sewer, why not just allow it in R2? And then you come into a whole new incompatibility where, they're out in the western part of Plattsburgh and they're popped up next to somebody's home. And if it's open 24 hours, people don't like that.
They're also the much larger parcels of town too, so somebody could buy like a 70-acre parcel out in the R2 and
So
then fill it with storage.
because of the character, I think overall, you want to retain the character that it's a commercial use or a semi-industrial type use. And then, so locate it in that part of town, but try to be as preserving of the public utilities.
One of the things that you and I talked about, Trevor, that differs from solar, just because it's been tossed out there a little bit just in general conversation, is the solar farms that we're seeing are having 20, 30-year contracts, whereas these don't have that same type of commitment. So if someone wanted to come in and remove them and build something else that was higher value, there could be
Easily done.
more easily done, right? So for a variety of reasons. So it actually provides more flexibility than the solar farms.
Trevor, let me ask you this, what about other towns, have they run into this problem, or is it unique to the town of Plattsburgh?
Not unique at all. It's just like solar, it's just like people wondering if they wanna keep allowing Dollar Generals and those things in their communities. These are all in that same
We're not the
cohort.
only people in the world.
And people, and every community struggles with how complex, the amount of ordinances Jess and I looked at that are as wildly, diverse as Airbnb ordinances, short-term rental ordinances. For every town has a different, storage version, just like they have a short-term rental one, and they're all over the map. Some are by percentage. Many we're gonna urge you to avoid ever regulating.
So, like in the town of Shazy, are there many?
Oh, yeah, Shazy, Beekmantown.
Because they're just not as visible, because they kinda can go in places that are less visible to us as we
Okay.
drive through them.
Oh, yeah, they're all over.
But I will say, we've learned, you know, I've talked to a lot of the storage people, just by luck. They wanna be here because we have the population. So it's more of a sure thing, right?
Yes.
You have the college kids, you have the city, you have the town, you have the population already built in. And a lot of those people receiving services are gonna be staying probably in town or close to town, and they want those storage units close, so that's why we're an attractive location for it, just like we're an attractive location for solar, because we have the existing infrastructure that some of the smaller towns don't have in the grid. So that's why we seem to be a little bit more inundated with applications.
Business models are driven by location,
Exactly.
you know, it's, so.
Is this might be a stupid question, but is this getting reflected in the rezoning?
Yes, so
Yes.
this proposal
Okay,
right
thank you.
now is built into the draft
Okay,
that is
thank you.
before you. Obviously, you all have the authority to amend that, but this proposal is built into the draft that is
Okay.
up for next week.
Probably the most important is the bottom bullet, removed from SD. Do you recall how much of the former county airport has been rezoned to SD? We certainly, right off the bat, realized, geez, we don't want the applications to roll in for that
Right.
in that
Exactly.
location. Just not ideal. We all know it's a use that people use, but that's not what was envisioned for that part of town.
The only thing that would be separate is we are suggesting that this map be adopted separately as its own standalone document for the town, similar to the roads regulating map. So that it isn't necessarily tied to the ordinance forever. We've learned that tying things to zoning districts, like the solar local law, is a little bit of an error because zoning districts can change. So we wanna base it on geography rather than zoning districts.
Okay.
This will come as a kind of a separate conversation with you folks, but the idea of adopting a known zone geographically called town center and allows us to not set, yeah, exactly what Jess said, but elaborating on that, we won't have to say in the future, we wanna have something not allowed in R2, R1, TC3, we want to list the districts, the boundaries, one
Yeah.
known boundary.
For example, the solar local law right now lists MH. MH no longer exists because we renamed MH to R5. So then, you have that incompatibility if you want to avoid that.
Okay.
And that's why geographic prohibition, we're looking at the geography of our,
All right.
But are you still saving the land that is valuable for?
Yes.
Yeah, if you look
Oh,
at
yeah.
that pink line,
Oh,
basically we're saying,
conservation lines, yeah.
we don't
yeah,
wanna
that's-
choose by district anymore. Cause what we learned briefly is that we wanted to prohibit, for example, solar in these town center districts, or actually, well, they weren't referenced because we changed things. But early on, we said we don't wanna have it where there's public water, public sewer. And so we said, let's allow it in R2. Well, about 95% of R2 doesn't have public water and sewer, but some does. The one
Right,
that was just
this one
approved
right
over
here.
here has public water. So it's imperfect to do it by zone, but if you have a sphere of a part of town that you want to, be protective of,
Yeah.
it's easier to do it by location rather than zone.
We also,
And it's more specific,
Go
actually.
ahead,
Yeah.
Tom.
The other thing is, at least from my observation, they're not very attractive at all.
Which one, the storage?
Yes, and I would like to see, if we're gonna have some regulations, I'd like it to look more like the industrial park. When you drive through there, the new part, it looks kinda nice. And these storage units, you drive by them and, it's just, there's not gonna be any improvements to them, there's not gonna be anything, they're just slabs and they're just long. I just feel like, there needs to be something to keep, to make it more visually acceptable for them. It's, you know, there's a couple where it looks
Yeah.
nice, that they have the trees and stuff, and they're a little bit back from the road, and you drive in. But most of them, you know, particularly hate the one on 374, you know, that's for trees, that was for, you know, other things, but there's nothing in between. Anyway, that's it.
All right, thank you
Thank you,
very much,
Jess.
folks,
Thank you for
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're gonna,
Appreciate it very much, thank
You're
you.
welcome.
we're gonna continue in advance, through the agenda. Just as a note, I think I said this before, I stated, and that Battlefield Monroe Gateway Project is advancing.
Trevor.
And we are doing the official groundbreaking, tomorrow, Friday, at, 10 a.m., over at the site. And, I just wanna thank the Luck Brothers, in particular too, they've been really, really wonderful to work with. They've just been really great, I know they got the bid, but they've been, working with us. And also, I should have said a little here, both, Trevor and Jess too, for their good work on that, so. Tonight, we have a little bit of a mixed bag, agenda, we do have some, appointments as it relates to some, promotions, et cetera. So, resolution 124, the appointment of Brett Davis as a maintenance worker 2 in the water wastewater department.
Whereas Brent Davis has been working in the water and wastewater department since May 9th of 2022, and whereas the director, assistant superintendent, and supervisors of the water and wastewater department have recommended Brent Davis to be promoted to water and wastewater maintenance worker 2. Therefore, be it resolved to receive and place on file the memo dated May 3rd of 23 from Scott Stoddard, director of water and wastewater department, requesting the promotion of Brent Davis as WWW maintenance worker 2. And be it further resolved that the town of Plattsburgh Town Board does hereby authorize the permanent appointment of Brent Davis to the position of the maintenance worker 2 as recommended at a pay rate of $26.86, effective the first full pay period following approval in accordance with the terms and conditions of the Teamster agreement currently in force with a probationary period of 6 months, effective immediately pending final civil service approval. And be it further resolved that the supervisor is hereby authorized to sign all necessary documents for the full-time permanent appointment of Brent Davis to the position of maintenance worker 2, and it is further resolved that a certified copy of this resolution be given to the finance manager, water and wastewater department director, and a certified copy also be forwarded to the Clinton County Department of Personnel for final approval and sign-off.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Costick, is there a second?
Second.
Wood, any discussion?
Just in the first whereas, it's just a correction for Brett's first name, just spelling. Change. Thank you.
Can I get a roll call, please?
Thomas Wood,
Yes.
Barbara Hebert,
Yes.
Carlos Costick,
Yes.
Dana Isabella,
Yes.
Michael Cashman.
Yes. Resolution does carry, thank you very much. Resolution 125, appointment of Thomas Burdo as a maintenance worker number 2 in the water wastewater department.
Sorry, I may not be out of order.
Do you want to?
I have for, are we looking at 126? Oh, no, I'm not on 125.
125.
Give me just a moment.
No, I have one here for you.
Here it is. Whereas Thomas Burdo has been working in the water wastewater department since May 9th of 2022, and whereas the director, assistant superintendent, and supervisors of the water and wastewater department have recommended Thomas Burdo to be promoted to water wastewater maintenance worker 2. Therefore, be it resolved to receive and place on file the memo dated May 3rd of 2023 from Scott Stoddard, director of water and wastewater department, requesting the promotion of Thomas Burdo as maintenance worker 2. And be it further resolved that the town of Plattsburgh Town Board does hereby authorize the permanent appointment of Thomas Burdo to the position of maintenance worker 2 as recommended at a pay rate of $27.86, effective first full pay period following approval in accordance with the terms and conditions of the Teamsters agreement currently in force with a probationary period of 6 months effective immediately pending final civil service approval. And be it further resolved that the supervisor is hereby authorized to sign all necessary documents for the full-time permanent appointment of Thomas Burdo to the position of maintenance worker 2. It is further resolved that a certified copy of this resolution be given to the finance manager, water wastewater department director, and a certified copy also be forwarded to the Clinton County Department of Personnel for final approval and filing.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Bostic, is there a second?
Second.
Isabella, any discussion?
Just a quick reminder that Tom came home to us on the township fees, with all the
Yes.
appropriate licensures,
Licenses,
so.
yeah.
This is part of it, in order to go to the 2 position, he had to be employed for a year, so.
Can I get a roll call then?
Unfortunate.
Thomas Wood,
Yes.
Barbara Hebert,
Yes.
Charles Costick,
Yes.
Dana Isabella,
Yes.
Michael Cash.
Yes, resolution just carried. Resolution 126 will be the appointment of Danielle Hampton as an account clerk typist in the water wastewater department.
Whereas there is a vacancy for the position of account clerk typist in the water and wastewater department due to retirement, and whereas interviews for the aforementioned position were held by the director and supervisors of the water and wastewater department of eligible candidates provided by Clinton County Department of Personnel, and whereas upon the completion of interviews, it is the recommendation of the director and the water and wastewater committee that Danielle Hampton be appointed to the vacant water and wastewater account clerk typist position. Therefore be it resolved that the town board does hereby authorize the hiring and appointment of Danielle Hampton to the vacant position of account clerk typist at a pay rate of $21.40 per hour effective June 5th of 2023. And be it further resolved that the supervisor is hereby authorized to sign all necessary documents for Danielle Hampton's appointment with a probation period of 12 months. It is further resolved that the certified copy of the resolution be given to the finance manager, the director of water and wastewater department, and will be forwarded to the Clinton County Department of Personnel, and a copy be placed in Danielle Hampton's file.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Costick, is there a second?
Second.
Wood, and I just wanna apologize for, there is a slight correction. Scott pulled this from a previous one. It's not a retirement, it was a
You're
transfer,
right.
so. Okay. Civil service process.
Thanks for the clarification, Michael.
Seeing nothing further, can I get a roll call, please?
Thomas Wood,
Yes.
Barbara Hebert,
Yes.
Charles Costick,
Yes.
Dana Isabella,
Yes.
Michael Cashman.
Yes, resolution is carried, thank you. Last resolution on the docket for consideration this evening is Resolution 127, Facility Rental Policy for 2023 update.
Whereas as indicated by the attached facility rental policy, the town board seeks to adopt an updated set of standards and requirements. Therefore be resolved that the attached town of Plattsburgh 2023 rental policy be and the same hereby is approved effective June 1st of 2023, and the supervisor is authorized and directed to implement the same for the town. And be further resolved that the town of Plattsburgh officially adopts the attached updated policy, and a copy of the policy be given to each department to add to their policy book. And be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution and policy be given to the town clerk and Parks and Recreation Department and the finance manager.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Costick, is there a second?
Second.
Isabella, any discussion? Seeing none, can I get a roll call?
Thomas Wood,
Yes.
Barbara Hebert,
Yes.
Charles Costick,
Yes.
Dana Isabella,
Yes.
Michael Cashman.
Yes, resolution carries, and I apologize, I meant 128, one-year agreement with Casella Waste Management.
Where, my turn? I didn't hear him, yes?
Yep.
Whereas Casella Waste Management of New York Inc. has submitted a proposed waste refuse New York service contract to the town of Plattsburgh for the term of 1 year, effective May 26th of 2023. Whereas the town attorney has reviewed said service contract and is satisfied that it is legally sufficient. Therefore be it resolved that the supervisor is hereby authorized to execute any and all documents necessary to contract services with Casella Waste Management of New York, and be further resolved that a copy of this resolution be given to the finance manager.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Hebert, is there a second?
Second.
Costick, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Resolution is carried, thank you. That was the last formal resolutions for the evening. Just so everybody knows, there are draft minutes, monthly reports, a continuation of something that we started last year with the Kittyville Volunteer Fire Department, really relating kind of to the town's old homestay with the field day, parade, et cetera, and fireworks. The annual audit, budget amendments, disposal of obsolete equipment. There's 2 of these, some of them are sufficient enough to meet the standards for international auctions, some
Okay.
are not.
Okay.
And then there's a 1-year road warranty refund for Northwood, supportive of the housing subdivision. That relates to the new road, and then the zoning map and ordinance amendments and secret review for 2023. So that is the material, and I know of no reason to go into an executive session this evening.
Can I ask us anything? There was a arbitration hearing on the 24th?
No, there's no arbitration hearing. We're going to have what they call an administrative meeting. I think that's on the 5th or the 6th.
So, more to come. Is there anyone seeking to provide committee reports? Yes.
So some highlights, Dana and I, as liaison to the codes and zoning, had a chance to talk to Steve Weinhoff about, permits and the activity there, because it's not to say that certainly we're entering the season where permit applications are bountiful. So from April 1st to April 30th, there were 32 permits, and May 1st, and these are approximates, but May 1st, 2023, at least until May 16th, there were 27 permits. So that's almost 60 permits. And in taking a look at that, that's the diversity that our town has when it comes to, approving permits. So for residential, it could be a manufactured home, it could be single-family residence, it could be a shed, it could be a deck, it could be a garage, an addition, in-ground, above-ground pools, carport. So just kind of, elaborating on that. For commercial, you can have a commercial that's gonna occupy space, you can have commercial roofing, we had that as a project, commercial alteration and replacement, and then remodeling, and our favorite signs. So we can install signs and we can replace them. So that's the variety of activity that's going on there. For planning community development, I had the opportunity at least to put it on the calendar, and they had a training for local planning board members. There were also ZBA members there as well, and there were other people from other municipalities, say a zoning board or planning board member. So that was Trevor and Jess that executed that, and it was done very well. It was almost a full day, but what they covered was things that were like involving site plan, subdivision, review, and seeker. And even though I've been a liaison for a little while, those are all good refreshers in terms of that. They also went into the zoning amendment process. What was nice is they used, in some of these situations, town of Plattsburgh examples, just to kind of make things more real. I thought that was great, especially with the town center smart growth plan. So it brought other members up to speed. Then later on, it was case law updates, and those are always really good to understand. And the one that I think caught everybody's attention was the New York State cannabis regulation and what that means for planning. So one of the takeaways I think that's important, that I think Jess and Trevor are very good about, is that we try to be specific in everything that we do in our planning and in our zoning board of appeals, but flexibility. So we can't always say yes, but there's be specific but be flexible. So just wanted to share that.
And I think it is worth noting, in particular, how that training came to be was that there was a very honest conversation with Trevor and Jess about some of the conference opportunities and professional development for themselves and also for some of their board members, that they were not super excited about some of the stuff that was out there. So they took on the challenge to create something that would not only meet the continued ed for the board members and such, but found a way to do some regional partnerships that was a benefit and to kind of lead within the county and elsewhere. So, so to their credit, and well done, Barb, for participating. It was in Albany on Wednesday, which I could have been in attendance for a couple of sessions. Anyone else looking to provide committee reports? If not, we will adjourn this evening at 6:53 p.m. Drive safe, everyone. Thank you very much.